It's the Bird Reboot podcast. Are you ready to get rebooted, Cardinals fans? He settles down, at least in the zone, and does not stop running.
Blake Murphy.
This is the identity for the Arizona Cardinals.
The run defense is just horrendous, and it's been horrendous for the Cardinals for a long time.
And Marcos Labrada.
He's going to bring over his philosophy. It should make it better.
Present the hottest NFL podcast from the country's hottest state.
He should be turning around the logo.
Actually, some breaking news we can cover here. This popped up just about, 6 minutes ago.
It's Bird Reboot.
Hello there, Arizona Cardinals fans. Welcome in to the Bird Reboot podcast. We got just me today on a solo pod. Super excited for you guys to be able to hear us as we talk about the Arizona Cardinals as they take on and get their second victory of the season against the Carolina Panthers. So this was honestly one of those games where when you talk about what the outcome that was desired would be and the feelings after the game, it's a very close feeling to after week one. You take on a Panthers team in which you get up 27 to, I believe it was at one point, 27-6 in the third quarter. Cardinals then give up 13 points in the fourth, where the Panthers are able to get 2 touchdowns. One, they go for 2 that they do not get. I think it was actually even some field goals, at least, were mixed in through there. Cardinals were able to get the win in the very final play of the game with Calais Campbell himself going and being the guy who was able to me for a second here while I change some of these settings here to make sure that I got that on mute. Making sure at least that the Cardinals were able to walk out of State Farm Stadium with a home win. And we're here to talk a little bit about some of the biggest takeaways as well as that. But let's get started at least here for the most part with a little bit of housekeeping. So a little bit of housekeeping for our podcast. First of all, Marcos, he had a last minute cancellation, was not able to make it today, unfortunately. We do have at least some good news, though, moving forward. Our podcast is going to be coming to you 2 times a week. We'll have a quick 30-minute or so Monday recap that'll pop up Mountain Standard Time, or when the time zone changes, Arizona time at noon, 3 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be recapping the game, and we'll do it in just a back and forth audio focus where we won't have as many visuals on the screen for you guys. We obviously have kept our audio podcast going for quite a bit of time, and we'll continue to do so. We're going to continue our Wednesday show with our film review and follow up with a weekly preview for the following game as well. For some of the games that have off weeks or other stuff coming up, we'll probably be bringing on a couple of guests for you guys as well. 2 more things when it comes to a little bit of the housekeeping. We are going to transition and kind of make archive our old Bird Reboot channel on YouTube. So if you guys have not yet followed the Cardinal Rule, make sure you go ahead and do so. That is something that is a huge plus as we kind of continue to build up this new Cardinal Rule network. Super excited for that. And then the final bit, at least as far as when it comes to just a bit of housekeeping for the most part, is making sure that you guys are following all of our other shows as well. But we are going to structure our podcast a little bit differently. So if you're wondering, hey, I'm in the chat, I'm making some comments wondering why are some of these things not being discussed? Maybe they're showing up on the screen. We've wanted to make sure that we can reach out to you guys. So we're starting up a new segment called Halftime on the Bird Reboot podcast, where during halftime, we'll go over your comments, kind of shoot out all of our viewers, say hi a little bit for the most part. Thank you guys again for supporting our show and content. And at the end of our show, we are going to do a Q&A segment. This is going to be something that we're looking forward to as well. So drop your questions, at least over there in the chat. I'll make sure that we get to all of them, or as many as possible if for some reason we come up at the end. But this is going to be a great way, we think, for you guys to be able to kind of have a little bit more interaction with our show as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with a little bit of a game recap here. So as far as the recap goes, Cardinals come out, and it is no possible way you could say they could have a better start. Cardinals go out there in the first 3 plays of the game. They force a fumble with a sack of Bryce Young by Josh Sweat. Zaven Collins tumbles into the end zone with that, which is fantastic. You start off with the game being 7-0. Open up the next drive, and on the second series of the game, you get a sack again by, this time I believe it was It was Baron Browning who got the hit. Mac Wilson, I believe, is the one who got the I believe it was it was the hit by it was Mac Wilson, on the blitz, and Baron Browning, was the interception. Cardinals then, at least for that one, take over at the 50-yard line. They end up with a 38-yard pass interference penalty to Marvin Harrison Jr., which is one of the things that there is some commentary on Marv we can talk about for some of this game, and then looking into our film review. He ended up with only 2 catches, I believe it was, in this game for a grand total of, I think it was 27 yards, which is not like necessarily what you want to see. But when it comes to how big the lead the Cardinals were able to get, and then what they were not able to do in the fourth quarter, which was run the ball to a win, that's one of those things, at least, that's going to be really interesting to watch when it comes to Arizona moving forward. Cardinals were then able to, at least for the most part, get down the field with, after those 2 field goals, they held the Panthers to a field goal. They had a punt, went back, were able to get another field goal. And then it kind of came down to, this is a 13-3 game. Carolina's hanging around. Cardinals take over and have an opportunity after forcing a 3-and-out. You clearly been winning the time of possession battle. Clearly you've been winning the turnover battle. You got to be able to put some distance. Otherwise, you're going to let them hang around, similar to the Saints last week. And what do the Cardinals do? They go and have Kyler Murray and a strong running game backed up with Trey Benson, and mostly just riding down Trey McBride was really what they did for the most part. Like that one, had Trey Benson was able to take over, get them down to the Carolina 11-yard line. And then that sets up, of course, that Michael Wilson 11-yard touchdown pass. End of half, come out of the half. What do? Drive down again and go for another touchdown. They had Greg Dortch had a nice solid 25-yard return. They were able to utilize Elijah Higgins for an 18-yard pass play, Michael Wilson for 11 yards, and then Elijah Higgins with the big catch and run for 27 yards that put the Cardinals right into Carolina's red zone. And then, of course, we could say that normally the red zone struggles, we'd expect them to be able to continue. Instead, what we saw, at least, was the Cardinals were able to pick up 12 yards on a quick pass to Marvin Harrison Jr. on 2nd and 6. And then they tried, for some reason, to go to Elijah Higgins. I'm not sure why they didn't just run it with James Conner 3 times. They were able to eventually punch the ball in with Conner running in untouched behind Cardinals fullback John Gaines reporting as the extra lineman. This was the spot where the Panthers had to show something or else risk getting blown out. They were able to drive down the middle of the field with some good runs for a touchdown. Biggest one, at least, was the 20-yard, I believe it was, kick return that they had for the Panthers. But the play that stood out the most on the following drive was at 3rd and 3 for the most part. Cardinals have a chance to get them off of the field on 4th and 1. Chuba Hubbard runs up the middle and is pretty much untouched for the first 10 yards of the run. They're eventually able to get down the field, and Calais Campbell ends up getting kind of hurt on the play. I think some of it was from what we looked at on the film, or at least I should say not the film, but the tape. It seemed like Panthers are running the ball a ton. Conditioning has been a thing with older guys. Calais, I think, was just kind of gas, needed an IV, take a break, whatever you want to call it, goes into the medical tent. No word on what that was. We do end up seeing, at least, that they had a short pass to Hunter Renfrow after the a couple of dink and dunks, a 10-yard pass, 9 and a 5, and that was kind of the story of the second half. Then, of course, it leads to the fourth quarter and probably the 2 biggest plays that determined why it was a close game. And it was that the Cardinals were able to, at the Arizona 40-yard line, had a 2nd and 9. They then had Kyler Murray gives a quick pass into Greg Dortch that picks it up at least for 3rd and 12. You're able to then have a nice 30-yard run from Kyler Murray, taking off down the sideline. And what ends up happening at the end of the play, after a 15-yard pass to the Carolina 12-yard line, Kyler Murray, it's 3rd and 3. You are in field goal range, and he ends up kind of running bootlegs to the left, trying to throw the football away, does it a second late, gets hit, ball gets picked off by Wanham, and the momentum at that point did shift. So Cardinals, if they get a field goal there, you're then taking a look at that score and saying, hey, guess what? Fourth quarter, we're up 30-9. The Panthers would have had to be able to get 3 straight touchdowns in a row just to tie. They'd have to get a 2-point conversion to go ahead of you with the last play of the game. Panthers only ended up having 3 more drives after that. So essentially you're talking about Cardinals get 1 stop. 1 single stop after that 39. Game is completely over. What goes on after that is you end up where the Cardinals end up giving up a touchdown to the Carolina Panthers. Defense was not able to get off of the field. Cardinals take over. If you get a couple of first downs, you're probably talking about running out of time for the Panthers, making it game over. Unfortunately, they struggled with having a penalty with Akeem Davis-Gaither that blocked, unfortunately kind of took a nice run away. You then ended up looking at having a negative 3-yard run after James Conner runs up the middle for 7 yards. The run blocking in this game, it was fine enough, but for the most part, you had a big run by Kyler, a couple of close runs to pick up some first downs from James Conner and Trey Benson. But really then on fourth, I think it was 3rd and 6, Cardinals, Kyler Murray shuffles things up at the line, moves Marvin Harrison Jr. around, gets that one-on-one coverage on the outside with Michael Wilson, and it's a miscommunication. Michael Wilson goes and just runs kind of the in route. Well, Kyler expects him to clearly run what looked like a, I believe, post route going out and then to the corner. And you punt the ball back to the Panthers, who now, when you look at it, they're still 2 scores away, or 2 scores and a field goal, 1 score and 2 field goals, I should say. Panthers go down and are able to get a touchdown again. Bryce Young gets sacked at 2nd and 10, incomplete the pass. You then end up with probably the Panthers play of the game. 4th and 16 at Carolina's 30. Just go ahead, get the guy down, sack him. Bryce Young gets away, throws the ball deep in the middle of the field to Tremaine, who picks up then 26 yards on 4th and 16. That was kind of the one where you just felt like at that point, all right, if the Panthers can punch it in here, we suddenly go from having it be a multiple score lead to suddenly you'd be up by 6, with the Panthers probably getting at least one more shot to go. They then have another 20-yard pass with short in the middle of the field. Tet McMillan's able to take up. You at this point start seeing the Cardinals lose corners. Max Melton goes down to what looked like a rough injury where his knee slams against the ground. He's in a knee brace after the game. You end up seeing Garrett Williams and Budda Baker collide with each other. Garrett Williams is off of the field. And what seems to be on that same play, seems like there could have been a gut and maybe even knee issue for Will Johnson. He ends up actually leaving the game on the final series after the touchdown pass, where at the 11-yard line, you end up with a short pass to Hunter Renfrow. He's tackled short. This is the play where Budda Baker and Garrett Williams were injured on that touchdown pass. You added insult to injury, where all of a sudden now it felt like this is how the game is going to go. It felt like Cardinals can't seem to get a stop. Their offense just seems to be struggling to be able to get anything done. Everything just seems to just be going the Panthers' way. And it follows up with the fact of, and I said this while watching the game, all right, you've got now an onside kick rule that out of 89 games we played with it, 0 of them have ever turned into a spot where the opposing team has not recovered that onside kick. Cardinals are now 1 of 1 where the ball gets kicked. It runs into a guy who's trying to adjust bounces off of his arm. Just poor special teams awareness. I think they expected that ball to be kicked to the side versus straight. Something that you'll learn, but again, you only get away with this because of that end game where Calais Campbell is able to go out. And this is something that I think we can talk a little bit about more in our film review, but a lot of this comes down to Jonathan Gannon, because when you look at the Cardinals and how they chose to play, once they got up 27 to, I believe it was 9, you kind of saw the exact same sequence defensively every single series. Rush 4, drop 7. Rush 4, drop 7. Rush 4, drop 7. Playing contain versus trying to see like these different stunts, seeing different blitzes. That was where it seemed like what the Cardinals' intention was to say, hey, we're not going to let you guys run the football on us on the first early downs for the most part. We're going to sell out to stop the run. We believe that your running attack cannot get past our defensive line, and they were right. And then on the long plays, if Bryce Young wants to complete a ball to the middle of the field on a 3rd and long, a difficult play, but not impossible, which credit Bryce for doing that, you get to a spot where all of a sudden you can go, hey, that's going to take time off the clock. We let them go down. Even if they score 1, 2 touchdowns, eventually time is going to run out on the Carolina Panthers. Now, I don't think that that is a wrong strategy, but it seems like either Jonathan Gannon and the defensive calls were a part of that, or a second one where the players just, we're winning the game, we're blowing them out, it's time to let up. That ability of just taking the foot off of the gas pedal and open things up for the Panthers. Let's go ahead and take our break here with halftime for the most part to go over some of our comments here for the most part like that. We got Dana R commenting in here talking about the Darius Robinson rep. He plays his assignment. That was one of the cases where we're starting to talk about, we'll do more in the film study. Some of this game was Arizona going, this is a weak team. We've got the lead already. We don't have to show them anything super special to go out and win this game. For a second week in a row, it seems like it almost backfired. But Darius Robinson, from watching, a lot of times he's not trying to get to the quarterback. He's trying to keep Bryce Young in the pocket. They didn't want the Panthers to run the ball. They did not want Bryce Young to beat them with his legs or to get outside of the pocket. They wanted Bryce to stand there in the pocket and throw the ball to the middle of the field to be able to take time off of the clock and force him to make these difficult throws. Some also talking about with Darius two-gapping a lot for the most part, some wins and losses. We also have at least some comments, at least some classy, nasty talking about with at least the Keim time. I know that's one of the areas of some of the guys left over with the Steve Keim era. Something we've talked about with Steve Keim, unfortunately, is Cardinals have had to take 3 years to kind of rebuild this team from where it was left. There's some teams that have been able to make it out of that pit. The Cardinals being one of those teams. They're 2-0. Team like the Chicago Bears, a team that has not had great roster construction over the last couple of years, in the New England Patriots, basically needed to squeeze out a win. Talking about the New York Jets now falling to 0-2. Things are very difficult, at least, to see for all of that. We got a comment here from the sociology professor. Thanks for tuning in. Poor run blocking seems to be a big part of the issue. Definitely agree. It doesn't seem like James Conner has necessarily lost the step, but it does seem like Cardinals in a lot of different ways having these creative, some outside gapping, some of the different areas for the run. We didn't really see it until a later series in the game. And then we saw it in the goal line where after that throw to Marvin Harrison Jr. and some of the plays, they finally handed it off to James Conner. Did not get a very good enough push, didn't go for it on fourth down because of how the plays worked out. You really feel like their bread and butter is start with James, Kyler Murray, the run game, use Trey McBride as that third down back. Things should go positively from there. Now, that being said, there is a unique thing we'll talk about a little bit more with our film review, and we'll watch to see if this is part of the reason why the Cardinals have struggled. But there's a new trend that's kind of sweeping across the league in terms of coaches are now starting to shift guys a little bit before the snap. So I'll do a quick screen share for those of you watching here to take a look at that. But what's happening is that some of these coaches are basically doing a last-minute quick adjustment ahead of time. So essentially, when you shift the front right before the snap, as you can now see here on the screen, watch how the Niners shift guys over for the most part right before the snap takes place, and suddenly it causes just enough chaos that the blocking scheme gets confused. This is where quarterbacks and some other people, when it's just before the snap, have to be able to have ways they can adjust. Maybe it'll be a quick alert where you'll be able to wave a hand. The running back and the scheme suddenly is there. Maybe some teams start to just call a timeout. Hey, you're going to shift over last minute. We'll call timeout. You can't do that same shift again. We'll have something that's ready for it in case it is for that very next play. Maybe it's going to be that teams are going to have differences, but the run blocking around the league has been down consistently. It's also led to where there's been some teams who have just look at the Cowboys, look at the Giants game from yesterday. Nobody really ran the ball in that game. Like, they tried to run the ball, but it seemed like for whatever reason, teams have now sold out to stop the run. They've built up the schemes now. They've realized, hey, the last couple of years, if you can run the ball effectively, you will be one of the top offenses. Teams are now going back and saying, you know what, Arizona Cardinals, we'll let you go ahead and throw the ball because we don't trust your passing offense. It's a bit weaker. We are going to, however, make sure we take away the run from you. You know what we've seen through 2 games? You've actually seen the Cardinals go out and get a win. Here, I'll show you guys at least a quick comment that we've had, at least from one of our site guys, Seth Cox. Let me make sure I can go ahead and share this screen with you. Apologies for hitting the wrong button for those of you who are watching here. Let me go ahead with the screen share here in just a second. Making sure we get you guys here on the technical side. And there we go. So we've got, at least with the Cardinals, that the goal, according to with our Seth Cox, at least, is talking about selling out to stop the run and force the poor passing game to beat you. That's something that's going to be really interesting to see if that continues this year for the most part. And then, of course, the last comment that we have, at least here for the most part now, is not seeing the pin and pull. Thank you, Dana, for pointing that out. So the pin and pull was essentially where what you'll do is you'll see, I would also say counter being their bread and butter. So the pin and pull is where you kind of will pull someone around, pull a guard, hit the one guy that's there, get a mismatch. You get them the outside or the tackle wide zone, I guess you could say, for some plays, which is Trey Benson straight. And then there's going to be the power, running the ball up the middle and being able to see other times guards will then pull, move around. You still run up the middle, but now you've got a mismatch where you're going to have a pulling guard moving into space, hitting a guy, causing all sorts of mayhem for opposing defenses. So these are all things I think that are really unique and interesting that we'll look about with the Arizona Cardinals. We'll find out how things are going to be adjusted moving forward as they take on a few other teams. Let's talk now about a couple of things that are pretty important to Cardinals fans. The first one being Kyler Murray in that one play. We've seen a lot of comments from people who were looked at that and were like, classic Kyler. Here's what Kyler has said for the most part. Things are really tough for a lot of people who are Kyler believers, for example, maybe you put it that way, who've seen some of those plays and the inability to put teams away in the second half on offense. We've also seen what I would say are Kyler haters who are like, the Cardinals are 2-0, and from what I've seen, Kyler's been stepping up in the pocket. There's a great play the other day where he's got people surrounding him. He steps up in the pocket, moves, navigates, keeps his eyes downfield, throws the ball. Another time we saw on one of the plays, he was able to get that big 30-yard run, stepped up in the pocket, didn't start running backwards. We saw another play where he did run backwards, ran around the corner, threw the ball away. Just being able to see him playing at probably one of the better technical levels as a quarterback. Even the last couple of weeks, he's picked up some consistent 3rd and 12s, and we've talked about how the Cardinals, when they're in these 3rd and 20 positions, even on 3rd and long, the passing game just wasn't quite in the right spot to pick up some of those big 3rd and long plays. We did see him take a sack late in the 4th quarter on one of the final series, but at that spot, for the most part, what people really care about is that red zone turnover. And I think for that, if you're going to talk about Kyler, where it's him making one mistake in the game when the Cardinals are up 27-9, I think that you can't just wash it out. Can't just mistake it, because as we've seen, those turned into turnovers later in the year in clutch situations. But at the same time, when you're talking about what is one of those turnovers where Kyler's trying to get the ball out of bounds, takes a hit, throws the ball a little bit late, and it's not like he's throwing and trying to hit the middle of the field. It's just ball got tipped, at least for the most part. It's one mistake in the midst of what I thought was a great game from Kyler Murray, in a spot where ultimately the defense and some of those injuries are going to probably be the story of where the Arizona Cardinals go from here as they take on some divisional opponents. Speaking at least here of those injuries, let's go ahead and focus on them. And we're going to go from ranking from least important to most important. Well, until we know the severity of the injuries from Jonathan Gannon, it's going to be very difficult to know because we don't know, from what we can tell, Max Melton, the guess at least, is either a fracture or a tear seems to be the case. He was in a walking boot after, I should say, not a walking boot, but a knee brace after the game. To me, it seems like there could be a dislocated kneecap with how his knee slammed the ground. Maybe there is a tear that takes place in there for ACL or LCL. Hopefully it's not a injury that is going to require severe surgery, but it could be an injury that does take him out for the rest of the season. You've got a groin injury to Will Johnson, who played through some of it and then was out for the last part of the game. That, to me, is the most significant one, as far as if he ends up having a more significant injury than what we anticipate, that could be very hurtful. But at least for now, until we know more, without seeing tears, without seeing other issues, without seeing anything that seems to indicate it's more than potentially missing a game or two, fingers crossed he doesn't miss any time at all. The one that hurts is Garrett Williams. Garrett Williams, in that collision on the touchdown pass with Budda Baker clutching the leg, he walked out of the game, but he did not put very much, if any, weight at all on that knee. That's a possibility where maybe there is going to be some knee damage that you see. Hopefully, at least it's less than that. But again, it's one of the places of where he is one of the most important cogs. And the Cardinals now have missed up to, if Will Johnson misses time, that's going to be quite a bit of injuries that are taking place. That's 5 injuries to the cornerback spot you've seen in totality. it's really tough in the best of times to be able to avoid having those sort of injuries. It's really difficult when it comes to the worst of times to be able to have that be the case. So here is ultimately hoping that we're going to be able to see at least one, if not more, of those guys be healthy. But again, that's going to be the spot moving forward. Cardinals are probably going to have to reach out and check out, is James Bradbury going to be available? How is his conditioning looking? How does the trade market look? When you lose two corners in a single game, you can probably get by with the depth that Arizona has, knowing you got Kei'Trell Clark, who you like. You can probably play him a little bit more in the slot. You've got a guy in Elijah Jones, who is a third-round pick, and a third-round pick that they kept over a guy for a reason, such as the likes of Darren Hall. That's someone who I think is an easy promotion to be able to then play the nickel corner spot as best as you can. But unfortunately, it is a spot where there is a limit, as we know in the NFL, to how many hits you can take at one position. We've seen it before. You take too many hits on the offensive line, your team starts dropping games. You take hits at the quarterback position, go from quarterback 2 to quarterback 3, you start losing games. Take hits at corner, where instead of trotting out corners 1, 2, and 3, or 2, 3, and 4, you start trotting out corners 4, 5, and 6. That's another way that you take hits against more talented teams. And it's going to be really interesting to see what exactly the Cardinals do moving forward with that. The final thing we'll want to talk about here, of the final three for our Redbird, or what I say, our reboot recap, is going to be the old man, Calais Campbell, putting a stop to the game. And this fits into what I think we would see from everything as well. The first couple of drives, Cardinals' defensive line looked unblockable. The last two series of the game, when they had to have stops, Cardinals looked unblockable. Calais Campbell just came through. They were able to push Bryce Young back. It seems like, to me, at least for whenever they needed it the most, the Cardinals had something dialed up that they were able to get after Bryce Young. I don't want to say that they loafed. It's hard to accuse players who are playing that of loafing. Hard to accuse the coaching staff of taking the foot off the gas. But either way, the end results are the same, and Arizona has to do that moving forward. And that's why it's good that someone like Calais Campbell became the story. It's his homecoming, after all. He has spent now in the NFL from age 23 to 38. He's had a nearly 20-year career in the NFL and is still playing at one of the highest levels. His pass rush win rate last year was fantastic. He was able to get pressure on Bryce Young and get the game-ending sack as well at 6'8" size. You kind of look at him and Larry Fitzgerald of the fine wines of the Arizona Cardinals. If the Cardinals had been able to keep Calais, it would have been great. They were not going to be able to afford to pay him and the likes of a Chandler Jones, and Jacksonville was going to up the price if Arizona was going to match, from what we know. He's had two fantastic careers, essentially one with the Arizona Cardinals and a Hall of Fame level career away from the Arizona Cardinals. Him having his homecoming and being able to be the hero was kind of the story of the day that shows that this is a different Cardinals team. The Cardinals team of 2023, they'd be 0-2. The Cardinals team of 2024, we would have said, hey, they went out, they got a win against the Saints. This is great. They lose this game to the Panthers, or maybe they drop week 1 to the Saints close, and they're able to have the similar blowout against the Panthers this year. This Cardinals team has veteran leadership, and I predicted when we were on the Cardinal Rule show on Mondays, the first week of the year, that the Cardinals were going to have some form of adversity that hit this year. There's going to be something that would hit them that would be difficult to overcome. My prediction was, with the veteran leadership on the team, they would find a way to overcome it. All right, so guys, we got our Q&A section over here, as well as a couple more comments from you guys coming here next for the most part. Ultimately, that is the Redbird Reboot. That's been our reboot section. Now let's go ahead and get to our reboot Q&A and questions for the most part here. We've got Steve Holler, I know, who's talking about how he's happy, but we aren't as good. And I think that's where we are not blowing teams out, but also you look at a team yesterday like the Giants, who put up almost 40 points on the Dallas Cowboys and a bad defense. They still lost the game. They're still 0-2 now entering the season for the most part. Had a chance to be 2-0, had enough drops, had some penalties, had an interception that Russell Wilson threw late that ultimately put away a chance that they could have had to drive down and get a field goal to win. Steve Holler also saying he's disappointed with the O-line and Petzing's offense. I think for everyone who watched this offense last year and saw how good they were at run blocking, it is a disappointment, but again, we can at least say that the Cardinals' pass blocking has been number 2 in the NFL. Teams have dared the Cardinals to say, go out, Kyler Murray, throw the ball from the pocket, beat us that way. And through 2 weeks, granted, against 2 bad teams, he's done that, and that's all that you can really ask of him for the most part here. Last comment from Steve there. I think Rallis kept the blitz packages from the fourth quarter for the most part here. Yes, that is one of the things, of course, that we talked about. The Cardinals in week one, we said they probably didn't show off everything that they needed to against the Saints. It was like a preseason game, very vanilla. And in this game, we saw in the middle of the game time, very vanilla. Beginning of the game, they caused havoc. End of the game, Calais Campbell and company, Josh Sweat should have even had a game-ending sack. It continued because of a downfield penalty. We saw the defensive line be unblockable, which is the hope we'd had for this Cardinals team. So I think that's a great comment, at least, that you made there, Steve, who also talked about losing the 5 defensive linemen. That's where the Cardinals lost last year, was against the Panthers. They ran out of healthy defensive linemen. Panthers ran for over 200 rushing yards in that game. In this game against Arizona, 48 yards total. Very true. We've got Hank Hill coming in, at least for the most part. Thank you so much, at least, obviously, Hank, for following. They love you and all of our other listeners as well, Hank, too. We got a question also here from Hank Hill, at least after showing a bit of the bicep flex, similar to what Calais Campbell did, shooting that basketball at the end of that sack and flexing everywhere. Is the majority of rushing yards due to scheme versus brute force? They missed tips blocking yesterday. I would agree. I don't think that it is essentially scheme. I think teams are scheming to take the run away from the Cardinals. I think we'll watch the film and see our teams doing these last-minute defensive line adjustments, because we always say the NFL is a league where it's all about punching and counter-punching. So if you're a boxer who's got their gloves in front of their face, someone's hitting you with straight jabs, you're going to want to eventually take advantage of that by hitting them with an uppercut. Well, if someone hits you with an uppercut, what's the thing a boxer does? Well, they take a step back, and then they straight jab right to the face, punish that person for exposing themselves. And I think the league, in seeing how good the Cardinals and other rushing attacks have been, they're finding a counterpunch, shifting the defensive line a little bit before the snap, mixing up some of the rushing schemes. That's something that I think that if the Cardinals and Drew Petzing are good, they'll find a counterpunch. This is an evaluation year for them. If they don't find that counterpunch and the rushing continues to suffer, we'll have to see. Do they look at changing out someone who's on the offensive line for a different player? Do we talk about a little bit of how the incoming potentially could change, where a Kelvin Beachum comes off of the bench potentially? Do we talk at least about how Will Hernandez is probably going to at some point be coming back? Maybe it'll be closer to Halloween than right now from what we've heard. But ultimately do think that they missed Tip Ryman's blocking as well, in terms of just being able to line up in 13 personnel. You're not getting as good of a blocker with Travis Vokalek as you are with Tip Ryman, who's one of the top run blockers at tight end in the National Football League. Jan Paul Edward de Dios is saying that the Pets have to rely on the pass game, and they have through the first couple of weeks. It's not been 300-yard passing games. The Cardinals have still run the ball, but they've been ultimately effective. They've been able to put up 23.5 points average through the first 2 games. That's good for top 12. So you're talking about, hey, if you start playing and getting a little bit more of that run game going, this could be a top 10 offense in the league, similar to where it was last year. But it wouldn't be through running the ball. It may be that the running just boosts and adds to it, but that passing attack, which we wanted the Cardinals to have, it hasn't come through in the fourth quarter, but through the first 3 quarters, Cardinals have gotten the lead, and it's been really running the ball to put teams away as for where they've struggled. And of course, the last comment, AZBro95 about the OC needs to go. That's something that I think it's going to be worthwhile noting. Marvin Harrison Jr., we'll talk a bit more on the film review later in the week. He had a great penalty, but ultimately just was not really utilized in the game. Cardinals didn't go to him. They used the tight end. It seems like that they just are a running back and tight end centric team, unfortunately. The other receivers on the team for Arizona, this is the wide receivers stats that they had for the most part for every single receiver after the 2 top tight ends, after McBride and Higgins. And Trey Benson were the 3 leaders in that category. That's Drew Petzing's bread and butter. He's a tight end running back guy. And that's where, if you're going to need to have an improvement, you're probably going to either need to hire a veteran former offensive coordinator who's got influence that basically can run the passing game, or you're going to have to accept that it's just never going to be what we want without a different offensive coordinator, because Marvin Harrison Jr. had 27 yards on 2 catches. You then had 1 catch for each of James Conner, but the other 2 receivers, Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch, had 1 catch for 11 yards. You put that together for their top 3 receivers, and that's a total of 49 yards on 4 catches for your receivers. There's a lot more room, I think, to grow there. And the question, of course, is, Trey McBride's going to get his. In this game, they decided we're going to give Elijah Higgins his. And in the future moving forward, we'll see. Is this going to be a down week where teams are scheming to say, hey, we're taking away the run, we're going to take away Marv, we're taking away Trey? Guess what? Elijah Higgins goes out there, gets the job done. Or are we going to be talking about this as after a solid week one, Marvin Harrison Jr., he's still, we said, through 100 games, he's averaging 50 yards a game or so. He's going to have a big game or two somewhere in there, but that's that 1,000-yard average. That's going to be what we're looking for. And in order to get 1,000 yards a game, Marvin is going to have to average at least 58 yards per game. Right now, he's a little below that after 2 games. We'll see at least how that changes with the next week. It's going to be there for the most part. Thank you, Hank Hill, for the response there. You are awesome. Hank Hill, no, you are awesome. This is the classic I love you random citizen move. And we've got Drew Terrell is the one that Dana is talking about as the passing game influencer. I do know he has quite a bit of influence. He was someone who was mentioned in the Bootleg Football podcast as someone that the staff is using him as evaluation material, meaning he may not be here next year if the passing game doesn't take a step forward. He's also the wide receivers coach. That's something else that needs to take a step forward. It would not shock me whatsoever if we get through the end of the season and depending on playoffs, no playoffs, all of that's going to play a factor, but it wouldn't shock me for the most part if this ends up being Drew Terrell's last year because we still have not seen the receivers take a step forward. Granted, if the Cardinals go out, bring in a second veteran receiver via trade, if the team is like, hey, we got a shot, we can go for it this year, that would be then a spot where then you get the ability to evaluate if the true wide receiver 1 and maybe even a true wide receiver 2. That seems like it would be my personal hope that you could then evaluate Drew Terrell based on having a veteran receiver to go along Marvin Harrison Jr. That's more than just the little bits that we've seen from Zay Jones. Guys, thank you for your questions. Thanks for your comments. That's it for our Q&A. This has been the Redbird Reboot. You guys have just been rebooted, and that means now it's time for us to log off. It means it's time for us to shut down. Till Wednesday. We'll see you guys again soon. Thanks again for tuning in.